taking the extra time beforehand to massage it to where you don't have to take all the time in the middle of it and then try and reverse it. And if you, like Matt said, this is perfect for setting expectations.
Yeah.
If we set expectations for the buyers before they step into that, it allows us to be able to guide them. If we don't properly, and now they're in the middle of a home inspection, and in their mind, they're worried that the house has a million problems, and the agent's trying to talk them out of asking for stuff, they're going to think that it was,
yeah.
Well, yeah, they're going to think we're trying to like manipulate it and get them to, you know, just keep moving forward, and it's all about the deal when it's not. So getting that, you know, out clear at the beginning, and then for those who are going to be difficult, just making sure that before the inspection and then after I say, you know, let's go through the 3 things that are most important to you tomorrow. So it automatically has them focused on getting rid of all the other stuff and zooming in on 3. And sometimes they get crazy and pick 4.
And guys, just we started a couple minutes early today. It is 3:02, so I just wanted to bring everyone up to speed. It is our Monday Mastermind. Today is all about setting expectations for buyers and sellers. So far, we started discussing, Francis brought up a really good topic that really kind of segues into our conversation, which is about home inspection issues that she's been having and just really setting expectations with it was your buyers. And I also think this also opens up a larger conversation, which goes into just bulletproofing the transaction. Because I think, especially right now, it's keeping transactions together, and a lot of that has to do with setting those expectations.
Yeah, keep in mind, these buyers right now are feeling like they are overpaying. And in most cases, guess what? They are. Right? So they just came off of this adrenaline dump of winning, in many cases, a bidding war, right? All of this chaos, and they come out. And now it's that, you know, is it buyer's remorse? Is it starting to set in that it should now be their turn? If I'm paying this kind of money, I'm going to want this, and this to be perfect. And all of those components are important. Now, I would like to hear, you know, from some others too. So Kurt, do you do anything with your buyers to set the expectations there, like home inspections and going in, so that you don't end up in quicksand?
Yeah. So specific to inspections, yeah, we'll actually give them a couple sample inspections from our own properties, since we're not at liberty to share other people's home inspection reports. But we've bought enough properties that we can share the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we give them an idea of what they're going to look like. The types of ways that we're going to, you know, what's a reasonable thing to ask for. Similar to what you said, I mean, I think we always say we want to try to narrow it down to a handful of items. And, you know, even from a negotiation standpoint, we try to look at what things belong together, because I think part of it is coming to an agreement, you know, coming to a meeting point, usually in negotiations when nobody's happy. That's probably the right middle ground. You can tell my father's a real estate attorney. But that's usually where we try to prep them. So, you know, even on the front end, when we're asking for inspection things in multiple offers, we're trying to outline to them seriously what's reasonable to ask for and what's not.
That's great. So he gives a copy of home inspections. That is awesome. That's a great idea. I never even thought of doing that. And that also gives them confidence too. If they see a copy of your inspection that was a bomb and you move forward and bought it anyway, right? It kind of subconsciously says, look, this is part of the process. It's so you know what you're getting, not so you can get something different.
Right.
Cool. Pat, how about you? Anything special that you do there to prep people going into inspections? You might be on mute, Pat, or you might just be listening. And if that's the case, then I don't mean to put you on the spot. Christine Van Riet, I see on here, if you could throw in the chat box anything that you do. I know you represent a lot of buyers. If you want to jump on, you're certainly welcome. But if not, I know sometimes you're in a position where you could just throw something in the chat box there and let us know if you do anything to prep your buyers and keep them together.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Christine.
Hey.
Sure. And you're talking about, I kind of jumped in as Kurt was talking. So you were talking about prepping for home inspections. I want to make sure I got that correct.
Yes.
Yeah, just setting expectations, right? Requires so they don't come out of home inspection looking for the world or completely fearful to where they want to do 75 more inspections.
Right. Typically what I say is, we're looking for environmental, safety, and structural issues. I kind of try to talk them off the ledge of, little things here and there, not trying to nickel and dime them on, a switch plate cover and that type of thing. But I really make a point of trying to say that we're really looking for structural issues, environmental, which could be radon, carpenter ants, termites, and then anything safety, which would be any kind of, electrical issues like that old, standard Pacific electrical panel type of thing.
Right. Yeah, I feel like that's also another way of saying something that I would say a lot when I would work with the buyers more often was sometimes the more you ask for, the less you get, right? Or they just pick all the easy stuff. They do that, and then they stick you back with the big stuff. But if you upset a seller and a seller thinks you're overstepping in one thing in the list, there's a good chance that they throw their hands up and then give you nothing. And I've seen that happen a whole bunch of times. I've seen 5 legitimate requests on one in Montville once. And then I think one of the other ones was to power wash the mold off of the sidewalk out front. Swear. So the seller's tunnel vision goes right to that one. And he's like, these people are completely ridiculous. What planet are they on? They think I'm going to power wash the sidewalk. Don't they know more? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not doing anything. So if that, and they ended up not doing anything, and the buyer ended up buying it as is. Now, if the buyer would have been a little more particular about asking for 2 or 3 things that were really important, I bet you the seller would have said, okay, that's a pretty big issue. I'm going to have to do this for somebody. And at least contributed something. So having the ability to put them in a position, just like overpricing, right? It's the same theory where by pricing too high, you actually will end up with less. It's the exact same theory there, just playing out in a different venue, where if they ask for too much, they could end up getting less. So it's rare they're going to say yes to everything. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, let me ask, is anybody here doing the same thing with the sellers on the opposite side? So is anybody prepping their sellers for the home inspections and how that's going to play out in order to, let's say, make that part a little smoother?
One thing that I always tell a new agent is you need to tell the seller that the inspector is being paid to find something. He's going to find something. That is his job. So even if you ran an inspection beforehand and you fixed everything, he's still going to find something. And when you set that expectation in the seller's mind, it could be a big thing, could be a little thing, it's going to be something. If something's going to come back, they're paying him $800 to find something. Right. And that does help the seller to understand, okay, I know no matter how perfect and special my house is, there's going to be something coming back from this buyer.
Awesome. Yeah, just to set those expectations that something's going to happen.
One of the things we do, which we do on our flips too, which we may be showing a little bit too much behind the curtain, but every once in a while, you'll get a seller that, like Jane said, needs everything perfect. Mm-hmm. And I have a seller recently that I was talking to about leaving a couple things that are not cosmetic and no one will know until the inspector undone. And he was like, should I spend the money on this now? It's like, no, because if you're going to spend that money, wait for the inspector to bring it up, and then you're going to look like a hero when you spend the money and do it. So, reverse polarity outlets are like my favorite, because an uneducated buyer thinks, oh my gosh, there's electrical issues. And it's like, outlet polarity is not a major electrical thing. But when you go through and say, all right, we're going to handle all the electrical issues, it's like that 5 minutes out of the day that I could teach my dog how to reverse a polarity on an outlet.
Can
Like
you-
it's sure, Bill. But leaving a couple of those crumbs so you look like a hero, and that actually you might actually stack up some of those things in your seller's favor. Where all right, we were planning on doing this anyway. Granted, there are things there are things that you should do that make the property more sellable. We'll hit those, but the things that a buyer's not going to see that an inspector we'll leave a couple of those.
Nice. Kieran, how about you? Anything that you do particularly to prep your sellers?
Sorry, I'm multitasking.
That's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I always let them know that, just like Jane said, the buyer is hiring someone to find something wrong with your house, and then you got to just, work it out and find out what's major. I mean, something's gonna come up, and just deal with it when it comes. If it's a major thing, you're obviously gonna have to deal with it. And I feel like it just makes them feel a little more comfortable, and they just know what to expect.
Yeah, so I think a lot of it too with the sellers is, here's a part of the transaction that I think a lot of agents underestimate that really plays into an amazing percentage of under contracts to close, and it's managing tension, buyer and seller tension with one another. So if you look at a transaction, like the buyer and the seller are arrows, right? If those arrows ever get pointed at each other, that's a problem. One of our biggest goals as an agent is to maintain a healthy environment. If the buyer and the seller butt heads, that's a problem, right? The chances of this getting to the closing table, if one is soured on the other party, becomes astronomically more difficult. Even an easy negotiation now becomes hard because everybody's taking it personal. So it's our job, guys, to be a buffer. Like, I can't tell you how many times an agent will call me with something that's like sharp, like an arrow from their client to me to deliver the arrow right through my client, right? And it is, in my opinion, our job as an agent to maintain a healthy, again, communication. And we are buffers for a reason. And it might actually feel good to be like, you're not going to believe what the seller just said, right? This is the seller's position. I want you to know that's BS, and we're going to fight back, and we're not going to let that happen. Well, now you just made your buyer pissed off at your seller, right? And that is very hard to undo. Now they don't trust them. Now there's a whole bunch of problems in there. This is where keeping the drama out of the transaction is important. So I will be a filter. I will deliver that message, but I will do it in a way that is not going to be personal, and where it takes that arrow and it aims it at somebody or something else. So how do we do that? When we prep a seller, we say, look, I know the buyer said they're not going to be looking for anything major in inspections, but I just want to prep you that when an attorney gets their hands on an inspection report, quite often their advice to their client is, look, you got to ask for some things anyway. So as perfect as this house is, as much as the buyer said they weren't going to be difficult, make sure that you're prepared, because it's probably going to be the attorney on the other side if you get a letter that's a little rough. I do that all the time. Sometimes attorney letters are rough, and I say, look, it's important that you understand that's not the buyer, right? That's the attorney. Or, oh, what is this person trying to change this around by saying it's not the right that the property doesn't have to appraise and I have to buy it anyway, right? So we're an attorney review now, and both parties are starting to do this. Well, I'm going to deflect that by saying, look, there's a really good chance that that's not even the buyer. I'll call the agent just to make sure, but understand that an attorney is looking out for the client's interest too, and you have a couple different parts here. So in any particular case, I can avoid seller and buyer going head to head and pointing those arrows at each other, I will. And that makes it much easier to get through inspections. It makes it much easier to get to, if there's an appraisal problem, right? Whose fault is that? The appraiser, right? So we'll say the appraiser, and then maybe the mortgage broker and the attorney are advising the buyer to present this way, not the buyer trying to get a bunch of money off the house so that you're screwed, right? So we have to constantly be mindful of the dialogue that's going back and forth, buyer to seller, both through the attorneys and through us. And that's part of managing expectations, big time, is controlling what filters back to our clients and then what goes back to the other side. Be the buffer. Turn 4-letter words into amazing, beautiful words that get the point across, but that you're not delivering it in a way that says, hey, here's what my client said. So you either do this or this, because you might as well just kiss the transaction goodbye.
I had that almost just happen over a water line for a fridge. It was insane. So like all these major, not all these major, but a few major inspection things come up, and the water line to the fridge completely set my seller off. And it was the attorney's language in the review letter that they paid X amount over list price and they expect everything to be in working order.
Right.
And the report comes back that the water line's not working, and she's like, well, I don't have a water line. And then it just almost went out of control over nothing.
Right. Yeah, and I think if you can, I hate to put it this way, and I know I'm being recorded, so hopefully this never makes it out into the public. If you can just get your client to seriously dislike the other attorney, that is a much healthier position than if they seriously dislike the buyer or the seller. Because that's the scenario, that's a case where, Karen, a little water line, if they're taking it personal, a little water line may as well be a new septic that they're not going to replace.
Oh, 100%. She's furious. I'm like,
yeah,
relax.
because it's a personal thing. Now, this person is trying to take advantage of me, and I'm not going to allow that to happen. I don't have to sell right now. This market's great. I can put it back and have somebody else. I might even raise the price, right? It's you get into this back and forth because people are taking it personal. And we are psychologists in our business. And the better you can handle emotions and keep everyone lukewarm, you want to keep them engaged. But rather than going hot, the minute somebody gets hot, that's when it's our opportunity. That's when we shine most as an agent, in my opinion. And it's your ability to calm them down, cool them down, and redirect that attention. As long as the goal is the right goal for them, right? If their goal is buying the house, we're not going to do that to talk them into buying a house that's not the right house for them. But sometimes people's emotions will get in the way of themselves and the goals that they want. And it's probably in their best interest to close on this house with the water line issue either being solved by one or not being solved by the other. And how equipped we are to calm those waters in those stressful situations, that is where, we can really separate ourselves. It's not just the sales skills and tools. It's about keeping everybody calm. And guys, a lot of times that includes other agents. If you find yourself as an agent starting trouble in a transaction, if you find yourself constantly butting heads with other agents, you got to look in the mirror and ask yourself if you're doing harm, or even if you think you're doing the right thing, there's a way to do it that doesn't cause strife and those arrows being pointed at each other. And then there's a way that gets the point across, but yet does it in a very peaceful way that you can negotiate through. And I'll tell you, if you do it in the latter of those two, you're going to get your client more. So you might feel like you're negotiating hard and strong and direct, and you should be on a reality show telling everybody where to go and how to get there. But you're actually, you're doing more harm than if you did it, in a way that was clear, conveying, right? But didn't bring that drama and negative energy into it. Because as soon as you have opposing forces, nobody's going to move forward until you get the tension back out of that air, in my opinion. So what about other parts of the transaction? So that is that's home inspections, right? What about setting? So let me just ask this: is there another part of the transaction right now, guys, that is becoming an issue more often than we would like it to, based on the market right now? Anybody?
Does the word begin with A, Bill?
I was going to say.
Yeah, it does. Big time. In the last 2 weeks, I had an under appraisal of $100,000 and an under appraisal of $80,000 on a $500,000 house.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and a couple weeks before, I had one of 125 grand under appraisal. Believe it or not, we were able to hold that one together. The 80,000 gap, I had just gotten off a call the week before saying how I have such a great closing ratio. Once something goes under contract, I prep everybody so nothing's going to go wrong. And then God smacked me in the face the next day.
Why'd you
He's
say
like,
that?
yeah, fix that one. It fell apart quicker than I could sneeze. So just when we think we got all the answers, right? Not that I do, but I just, it's important that we understand we can always learn and sharpen these tools. But these appraisal issues are popping up left and right now. And I believe the appraisers are really starting to crank down on just letting this pricing increase run. So are you guys prepping your buyers and are you prepping your sellers for the appraisal process? And if so, how are you doing that? Anybody?
All right. I'll go. So one of the things that we've been doing with the multiple offers is that when we've had multiple offers, who's willing to waive and not be subject to appraisal? Because I've also had a lot of issues with houses that did not appraise. So if you're lucky enough to have 10 offers, 20 offers, some of these people have the funds and the cash and they've done it. However, we've had a lot of them also where we've had to have the conversation with them. I always say, don't go out celebrating yet. Don't. Actually, we have a closing tomorrow. I'll be honest with it. Bill, it's Ronnie's client, right? That's buying my 2-family in Clifton. And I told him from day one, I wasn't nervous about that house with anything else, but I told the seller from the beginning, I am concerned about the appraisal because it is a 2-family house. And it sold for $570. We're closing tomorrow at $570. And I thought that was really aggressive for what it was. So from the beginning, I always said it to the seller, this is what my concern is. This is what we have to make it through. And this is what could happen if it doesn't appraise, and giving them the scenarios and options. Now I have another one in Passaic that just underappraised by, we sold it for $360. Appraisal came in at $313. Horrible comps, couldn't fight it. And we were able to negotiate back to asking price, which was $335 with the buyer and the seller, almost like in the middle. I've had a lot of middle meeting the last few. So I've been telling the sellers right from the beginning, you're going to get multiple offers. You're going to get crazy offers. You're going to get all this, but just know that we have to pick the strongest one and look for, who maybe can waive the appraisal, who has the funds, or just be prepared to renegotiate because the bank isn't going to necessarily agree with what that buyer said.
Right. So I know a lot of headaches can be saved up front. For those of you who are in a listing seat, you can kind of get ahead of this cart by in our multiple offer instructions for the team. Whenever we have multiple offers, we send out a list of instructions on how to submit your offer, and we try to subconsciously slip that appraisal conversation in there. So it states very clearly, if your client is limiting or waiving the appraisal contingency, please indicate that clearly outside of the contract. I don't want that in the contract because that's going to force it to underappraise. In my opinion, the appraiser sees that. But it makes them think, hey, wait, maybe someone else is limiting or waiving their appraisal altogether. And usually when we send that out, especially if it's a hot property, a couple of people will come in with language that says, all right, we'll give you a $30,000 buffer. We'll give you an appraisal floor of 50. Well, I actually had one waive their appraisal recently on one in Woodridge altogether, but they're getting a mortgage. So technically they can't waive their appraisal altogether, but they wanted to make it clear that no matter what happens, they would change their loan and come up with that, and they wanted that to be a factor in who we decided to go with. So you can, as a listing side, take some steps to put it out there. If you call an agent and say, hey, will your client waive the appraisal, and the buyer gets that phone call, that's usually a weird phone call for them to get, and it's not going to work in your favor. But if you send that out to everybody and it's fair and you're just telling everybody, if your client's looking to do this or do this, clearly state it. It can open that conversation for a couple without it being abrasive. You're inviting them to do it as opposed to for you asking them to do it. We've had a ton of luck with that there too. So anybody else on anything that they can do to prep the buyers for it? Expectations. So I mentioned in our buyer consultation, we do the story where we explain the whole process of purchasing from beginning to end. And people love that. By the time you're done with the story, like their shoulders go down. Now they understand what this whole process looks like. And they really trust you to get them through it because you know it enough to just explain it to them. But when we talk about the appraisal there, we talk about the appraiser having the need to look back in time right now. And that there is volatility in the appraisal process because in order to get a property, in order to win a bidding war, you have to pay X amount in alignment with today, or maybe even a little ahead of today, which might be behind tomorrow. But ahead of today, where the appraiser is coming in and they're only looking in a rearview mirror at what happened the last 6 months. So we can very well find ourselves in a position where there's a gap between what an appraiser says it's worth. You might have 4 offers at 500, but the appraiser comes in and says it's worth 450. It's simply a mechanic. It's the mechanics of the numbers as opposed to a true reflection of what the buyers are willing and able to pay. So when a buyer understands that concept, they can understand much easier that it's not always meaning that they're overpaying for a property. Because the truth is, if someone else closes and buys it at that same price, the next day there's no problem with comps anymore. That now becomes the new starting point for the whole market. And now people are going to be pricing above that. So somebody who walks away because of an underappraisal in today's market, when there's 5 others sitting under contract that are going to close at a higher number, if they walk away and say, I'm not overpaying for this house, next week, next month, they may have to pay 25, 30 grand more for the same house because now once all those close, the market shifts up and that becomes the new starting point. So it's important that they understand that and it takes, again, that immediate thought of we're overpaying out of the mix. But it's also important that we explain that up front because just like home inspections, if we're having that conversation with the buyer in the moment, oh, don't worry, this thing just came in 50 grand under. Listen, the appraiser has to look back, right? There's no way that they're going to get it to appraise now. Once these other ones close, you'll be fine. No, because then they call their mom, and their mom's like, get rid of that realtor. They're just trying to get you to overpay for a house, right? And the whole thing goes sideways. So again, we got to set these expectations up front, which is why I love in the buyer consultation, we break it into 2 parts, wants and needs at the beginning. This way we start off of it all being about them. It's all about you. What are your wants? What are your needs? They pour it out. And then here's what we're going to do. I don't care if you bought 5 properties in the last couple of years. This process is evolving every minute. I'm going to remind you of what this whole process looks like from the day we start shopping until the day we're under contract and close. And we can teach these little lessons in there by explaining it and setting the, setting those expectations. Nazir, are you able to talk? I see you're on mute there.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So, Nazir, have you, this is something we've been working on a lot, right? With setting expectations. Are you having any experiences that you can share with us where setting the expectations either on pricing, on appraisal, on inspections have helped you as of late having those conversations first? And if not,
Yeah,
you can say no.
actually, yeah, I can say where I haven't had set the expectation and it actually backfired. One was with a deal we were able to get under contract, get under attorney review that's off market currently. But I didn't set the expectation and talking to the seller about commission. And in doing so, it kind of messed up with negotiating for the price with the buyer. And you always talk about it's important to set the expectation and the price early. So for the price that we came out at was $455 was the price that I told the buyer the home was worth. The seller, the bottom line she needed was $430. So I told her the commission was added on top of that. When I told her the commission, her price became $460. I just told the buyer that the price on the house was $455. So it almost backfired in the sense when we were negotiating price, it looked as if the seller wasn't willing to budge in her price when he came to his new price at 440. He offered 440 was his offering price, and then he came up at 450. She didn't come down at all from the 455 price, but for the buyer, it looked as if she wasn't budging. But it was because I didn't set the expectation early in talking about commission and pricing and everything. So I couldn't go back to him and say, oh no, she started at 460. I already lost that battle. So that's something when early on is whatever you're going to do in any transaction is set the expectation early to avoid anything coming back on the back end.
And when Nazir called me on that, I said, when he finally pulled it together, I said, let me ask you something. Will you ever do that again? Did you learn a lesson from that, right? Because that's a costly mistake, right? It cost them thousands of dollars.
Yeah, the buyer beat me up for on commission as well, because we ended up at 453. The buyer said, hey, so are you able to, I know that, this isn't, this is off market. Are you able to, I heard something about you negotiating your commission. So I had to go back to the seller and say, hey, we agreed on a flat fee. I had to go back to the seller and say, hey, look, are you able to take, something off to put it all together? So exactly what you just said.
Yep. And you learn. And that's where I'll throw a little philosophy in here, guys. I say this a lot when people are having challenges. And this is something that I struggle with. I think all human beings do. The thing that really separates, in my opinion, people from good to great is their ability to make changes before they have to, right? Like, it's easy to keep doing what you're doing until you can't do it anymore, and then you change, right? You keep doing what you're doing until, oh my God, I have 20 under contract, so now I can't handle it anymore. So now I have to switch up my whole system. But how amazing would it have been if we put a process in well before we reached that point where we could have, right, handled 20 under contract? Nazir, and this isn't a hit on you, right? Like, this is all part of the learning experience. But if we would have honed that skill and ability prior to finding yourself in a position where it cost you $5,000, that would have been a much more painless transition into doing it. But as people, we often wait until we're like until our schedule is so packed that we're ready to have a meltdown, and we're like, oh my God, now I gotta figure out a way to handle all this. I gotta retool my whole day. I'm gonna create blocks. I'm gonna prospect in these times. I'm gonna do all that because we're in a point where we can't take it anymore. But the ability to change things before we're at that point, that to me is the part that separates the people that are really good from the people that are great, because it allows people to vault 5, 10, 15 years ahead of the learning curve, because they're not waiting until they're in the pressure cooker to change, to say, okay, that pressure cooker's coming, so I'm going to change now, right? I might not have to get up a little earlier right now because I can deal with what's happening. But if I want to go there, in order for me to get there, I'm going to have to make some changes in how my mornings operate and all that. So I'm going to make that decision today and watch how much quicker that shows up. It's the same theory. You're setting expectations for yourself. But in what happened here with Nazir, if we maybe just took a little more time up front and role played how those conversations were going to work with the seller, we could have set those expectations and not had a costly mistake. But this is another example. Ron and I built a property, one of our development properties, we lost a ton of money on. And it's good to be in a position where that's not going to end your world, right? But I look at it like the money that we lost there taught me so many things, including how to build a house, right? Which people pay a ton more to go to college and learn all of that along the way. So if we do take those moments and those losses, if we take a deal that fell apart and you're never going to be able to put it back together again, but learn one piece from it and say, I will never make this mistake again, and you stick by that, then that loss, then that underappraisal that fell apart, then that client who then went and worked with the only agent you couldn't imagine them working with, and it's like a knife in your back, then it was all worth it because you use that one piece to better your game and say, this will never happen again. And if enough of those pieces come in play, now you're a version of yourself that you never would have been without them, and all that lost money is actually going to contribute to a lot more gain down the road. So we could try to pivot that. And that's what Nazir, I know, is doing, is taking that lesson of not setting those expectations up front with the seller, and using that to where that will never happen again, and perhaps saving him a ton more money or gaining more down the road. Anybody else? Pat, do you have any any expectations that you like to set or work with your clients? And
I just wing my whole life, Bill. Actually, I jumped on late because I was on the call doing a buyer consult, and I have to prepare everybody up front. Like if she's looking at 460, I'm like, all right, so we're going to start looking at like 430 or so. Like if you could pay 460, we can't look at 460. Right. And sometimes I feel like maybe I got to soften it up a little bit because I think I scare people, but the reality of the market right now is that if you could pay X amount, you have to expect to be going in there and, limiting some home inspections, and, you have to get out right away. You have to expect the bidding war. But in the end, it was okay. But I mean, these are things that buyers need to know this. There's somebody else in the office that I've been talking to, and if their people are looking at, if they're coming offering 450, 460, I'm like, you're wasting your time with these people. But more than that, I think the expectations were not set in the beginning. Buyers right now, it's so important. And I'm doing the same things with my sellers in reverse, pretty much. Setting that when we list it, doing coming soon, not reviewing offers till Monday, the whole thing that we were started, doing like a month ago or so, and working like a charm.
That's it's a beautiful thing. I'm going to ask Matt in a minute to share, from a brokerage perspective, it's the same thing. It's about setting expectations, right? Yeah. With people when they come in. But Pat, you said something there that I think was perfect, in that we have to tell these people, what the reality is and what's happening. A lot of us are afraid of scaring them. But if you don't, what's going to happen is, and I watch this play out time and time again, they'll leave you, right? Yeah. And then you'll be bitter and be like, I hate people. No one's loyal. I showed her 48 houses. We lost 5 bidding wars. Like, it's my fault. And then they'll go and they'll meet somebody who sits with them and uses that as an opportunity to just be very clear about what's happening. And then they will be comfortable now with maybe throwing their heart over the bar and just betting all the chips to get a house. And then boom, first week they secure something with somebody else. And it's not because you weren't able to do it. It's because the experience of them not being prepared actually set up the next agent to just drill, right, and prepare them in the moment. And then the transitions like this. And then that consumer in their head is like, this agent's amazing, right? One time we ended up getting it. And it's off of your hard work. So the same thing goes for sellers. If it's priced too high and it's not going, if you're not being clear with them about pricing, if you're dancing around that topic, what's going to happen when it expires is someone else is going to come in, be brutally honest with them. They're going to adjust the price down. They're going to be in a whole new price bracket, which you would have sold it in a second. And then they're going to run and tell all their friends that this person was amazing and that, Bill couldn't sell my house for 6 months. This one came in, had 2 offers in 2 days. They'll forget about the part that they reduced the price and did a whole bunch of other stuff. But don't ever be afraid to engage and be honest about what they need to hear. It's way less risky to do that than it is just to tell them what they want to hear, because they're your client. You don't want to hurt their feelings, and the potential for damaging that relationship when stuff goes down the road.
I'll usually tell them that it's my job to educate you. I'll use that word, that I need to educate you basically before you jump in, because literally going out and a buyer buying a house right now, you're jumping in. It's like in all my years, I've never seen a market like this ever.
One thing I would also say too, that I thought that Frances said before that I really liked, and I don't know if everyone picked up on it. I mean, she'll set expectations each step throughout the process. So she said, like, when it was a home inspection time, she's like, well, this is what could go wrong. And this is, when the appraisal, well, this is what could go wrong. So you're setting the expectation of what could happen right or what could happen wrong. And I know when I did a lot of transaction coordinator work back in Morristown for Gordon Crawford team, that was a big part of my role, which was calling each client every week as to where they were. It's like, okay, well, this is what might happen, and setting that expectation, and also how long it could take. Attorney review, that could take, a certain length of time. And I think people appreciate that. It's just more being in the know as opposed to always being like, well, this is good, bad, and the ugly. Just understanding what could happen and how long it might take.
Yeah.
People really want to know the process.
Correct.
Especially when everything is moving so quickly now, buyers and sellers. You know what, they shouldn't be asking us what the next step is. We should be telling them what the next step is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and guys, I like that. If those of you, especially on the listing side, the buyer is a little more chaotic of a process. When I take a listing, that's our buyer sound. When I take a listing, I'm super clear, and I usually do this once the listing's signed, right? So, okay, guys, here's how it's going to work. I'm not asking them if this is okay. You are going to hear from me once a week. You're going to hear from me every Thursday, okay, with the market update. And then I say something for accountability for myself. I say, if you don't hear from me on a Thursday, please call the cops because something's really wrong, right? That's my commitment to you. You are going to hear from me every Thursday. And on that Thursday, I'm going to give you a market update, a marketing update, and any feedback from Monday to Thursday. That's our weekday feedback. If there's any showings from Friday to Sunday, you're going to hear from me with that feedback only on Monday, right? That honestly, that one might be a text or something. But I set these expectations. I don't get calls on the weekend from my seller. Hey, is my home in the paper? What are you doing to market my place? It doesn't happen. Yeah. They become very comfortable and love the process, especially ones who were listed with someone else. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. You don't even tell me anything half the time. Half the time, I'm like, hey, I just want to check in with you. There's no updates for you this week. Nothing's evolved, especially in the high end, like the luxury. This could go on for a year, and they hear from me every week, and they love it. And then they just start talking about other stuff. But it maintains a relationship. It maintains the expectations. And if something does start to go wrong taste-wise, I feel that. So I'm setting those expectations of how it happens. So I'm not the target. I'm the one on offense. And it keeps everybody in, like Pat said, they want to know a process. So no matter what happens, as soon as we go under contract, I tell them all, I say, listen, we're now going to transfer from Thursdays to Tuesdays. And I don't just tell them we're going to do it. I tell them why. Because if we do this, if I continue to keep this late in the week, a lot of times I have banks, I have appraisers, I have attorneys now that are going to be involved, and it might be too late in the week to get something done. So we're going to shift our under contract calls to earlier in the week. So every Tuesday, you're going to hear from me with an update and with our next step, every Tuesday. And that allows me to chip away 2 hours on a Tuesday and 2 hours on a Thursday to handle all my client calls. At some points, I'm dealing with 25, 30 active listings, 25 under contracts. Like, if I'm all over and as an update comes in, I'm letting a seller know. If I'm sending them, if they're texting me, hey, what's the feedback? And I'm doing that in that moment, I'm going to melt down at 10 listings and 10 under contract. It's just not a process that can handle that kind of load. So not only is it about setting the expectations, but it's about delivering a better consumer experience by me setting those expectations up front.
Well, and I was also going to say to that, one thing that I heard on one of the mega camp speeches that I was on last week, it's very simple, but if you're going to say you're going to do something, do it. Like if you're going to tell people, I'm going to call you on Tuesday at 2, then call them Tuesday at 2. And I know that's simple, but make sure that I think sometimes a gap that happens in people's businesses, they overpromise things or they underdeliver. And I think, with what you have, whether you have your list or whatever, that you're going to make those calls on Tuesday. You've got that blocked. And so it's just important that whatever you're promising, make sure you actually do it. I know that sounds simple, but it's, that was one of my ahas last week for Mega Camp. It's like, if you promise to do something, do it when you say you're going to do it.
Yeah. And people become so comfortable with that. After closings, I can't tell you how many times I could search it on my text messages. People like, oh my God, it's Tuesday. I miss hearing from you, right? Like, oh my God, on Thursdays, what am I going to do when I can't talk to you anymore? It's like it's a comfort part of that process that they go through. And at the end of the day, it's way easier for me to handle it that way than the alternative. But it takes an extra 5 minutes up front to save maybe hours of pain down the road. That's where I say it's the good to great. And I still got a lot of growing to do. But I'm saying that to force myself to have made that decision, and to be honest, sometimes I would not be able to hold myself accountable to that, which is why I say things to force me to be held accountable. When I tell every client that if they don't hear from me on this day, call the police, something's terribly wrong, that's my accountability. I have no choice now. I don't care if it's 9:30 at night, I just got bombarded with a whole bunch of things in a row. I'm going to at least send them a text. Hey, I want to apologize. You know how important Thursdays are to me. I'm waiting to hear one thing back. Let's catch up tomorrow morning. I'm still touching base on that day because I set that expectation.
Now, Bill, just to kind of shift gears a bit, and maybe I'm throwing you a curveball, but setting expectations to sellers and buyers is also one thing within the transaction. Do you ever set expectations to get referrals from them? Because I've heard of top agents who will set expectations from the beginning, and say, okay, at the end, setting expectations to deliver referrals to them. Have you done that with your clients?
Yeah, so that's actually an area where I have a lot of work to do, right? And I get a nice flow of referrals that come in.
Yeah.
I put it in my email signature. The day that I put that in my email signature, I would say my referrals doubled, right? It says, I forget what exactly the wording is, but I try to do it in a tasteful way. And it is kind of a subliminal message, but anytime, I gotta go back and double check my email. It talks about, all referrals are welcomed and appreciated, right? For a buyer or a seller to constantly see that, then they're out looking for referrals to give to you. If not, they could love you. You could do the best job. And it's not that they're being rude by not recommending their sister. They're just not making that connection. But there are agents, and a lot of the training that we've done in scripting, where they will say the hottest point to get a referral is when you're actively working with the client, not once it's closed. So as you're out with them, especially if you're providing stellar service, if you're listing the house, you set up the delayed showings, you got your Thursday calls rocking, and they're like, thank you, Bill, thank you so much for being on top of it. Feel free to interject and say, look, if you know anybody else who can, benefit from my services, please don't hesitate to pass it along. I promise to handle them the same way I'm handling you. Put that in there. But like Matt said, some do expectations, and say that, my goal is to provide such great service to you that by the time we close, you would have enough confidence to have at least given me one referral.
And it's almost setting an expectation of, from the beginning, outlining what you're going to do from start to finish, and then saying, if I deliver a perfect 10 experience, can I count on you to provide me with one referral? And I've seen that work for but everyone's different. I mean, that's not going to work for everyone. But I know, I was in Morristown, worked with Sean Chaconis, and that is something that he does and gets a lot of referrals from that, which is just, look, here's the expectations throughout the entire course of the process. At the end, if when we deliver, if you give us a 10, can I count on you for a referral? And, it makes the client almost feel awkward if they give it a 10 and not give a referral. Right.
One of the things that I think is so important about what you're saying is if you're asking for referrals all the way along or earlier in the process, when agents wait towards the end to do it, those buyers, whether they're buyers or sellers, have experienced a lot of stress. Yeah. And that's what they're remembering. Whether you created the stress or not, that's what they're remembering. So their relationship with you could be good, but it's not as comfortable as it was earlier on. And this goes to, most important, for your reviews. When you're asking for a Zillow review or whatever reviews you're asking for, you should be asking for reviews all along the process, because sometimes something happens and it's not your fault, and now you're not getting that review. But if you had asked for it, oh, hey, we went out and we saw 5 houses today. Hey, shoot a review about how the day was. That's a positive thing, and that's going to build you up on Zillow, and it has nothing to do with whether the house sold or not. Because sometimes when it's sold, they don't want to give you a review anymore, which has nothing to do with you. So asking for it early and asking for it frequently is the best way to get the both referrals and positive reviews from the clients.
Yeah, that's a great point.
That's awesome. I never even thought of that. And I'm just thinking in my mind, I just set a goal. So we usually go for a review on Zillow after But like the one that just fell apart where there was 80,000 gap in the appraisal, like I would be worried about asking for a review now. A couple weeks ago.
Well, after the offer's accepted, that's probably the best time to do it because that's when both sides are probably at the highest point.
Yeah, I think that's what Buffini says right after
right after the accepted offer.
Yeah, and then
When
maybe
you're
during
waiting for closing, when you wait for closing, what are they doing? They're freaking moving. They don't have time to give you a review.
Well, yeah.
Like, you need them to spend some time on it. So it's waiting for the close or close to the close is not the best idea. You should work a little bit all the way through.
I like that. And then maybe you could take two positions, like say, hey, my goal is during the process, maybe have everybody post to Google, and then after maybe Zillow, right? So you can actually process around that. So it's not just random stuff. But that's a great point, Jane. And you could set those expectations. If I'm doing a great job, right? My expectations would be in return for doing an amazing job for you is just that throughout the process, you can post some reviews just to, allow that to go.
Just tell everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So Bill, we have about 5 minutes left, I believe. So I want to open this up. Are there any other questions? Anyone that wants to, say something that maybe hasn't been said on the call today that we can handle in the next 5 minutes?
Silence is beautiful.
I don't get bothered by silence. I'll sit on for a couple minutes. No, but I'm just kidding. But does anyone else? Yeah, go ahead, Kieran.
So I just want to thank you for doing this because even some days I can only listen. Yeah, I always walk away with a little piece, and you don't get that anywhere else. That's all I gotta say.
Nice, man. Thank you for that review.
I'll be sure to put it on Google later.
Nazir, I could always count on you for a good question, man. You got any question to close us out with that we can maybe toss around the group here?
Or an aha that you might have gotten from today?
As of now, no, nothing specifically. It was a lot of ahas. One was just the I guess Bill's process of stellar service. Something like that goes a long way as far as just someone knowing you're being on top of things, and it ties back to what Matt said, just sticking to your word, and a person who knows they're working with someone who anything they say it's kind of law in a sense. They know they're working with the right person.
I love that.
And that's a great point. And one other thing is it makes it replicable, right? One of the reasons that I feel like I've watched people evolve when they plug into something like this is it's not anymore about just the person, the personality, the energy that someone brings, although that's all important. But when you create a process of expectations, like as I look forward and say, all right, what are the next steps for me? And how did I replace myself in working with buyers so that our buyer side continues to grow every year and I'm not doing that?
Yeah.
And then how do I transition that to now sellers so that I can continue to work on the business and create a better world for everybody else while that continues to grow? And the only way to do that is to have processes and structure that you can now have people work with you because of the standards that you represent, not because of you. And I think for real,
that was actually in the book.
That's in the MREA.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. It's really hard to comprehend sometimes in the moment because we like to think, hey, somebody calls because of our relationship, which they do. But if you then can provide someone else representing and to a 10 those same standards that you set in your business and they attribute that back to you, then the whole thing can work just based off of what you represent, not what you do.
Well, that's to Nazir's point. That's one of the myth understandings in the MREA is that agents feel like they're the be-all end-all for everyone. They have to answer all the questions, that they're the reason why people choose them. And obviously that's a part of it, but it's really more the standards that somebody has in place. And so to Bill's point, it's creating those systems, which by definition is things that can be replicatable or duplicatable. I can't think of the word, but that you can do over and over and over. And that's creating those systems to then live up to the standards you have set. Right.
I know alone, if I give a listing to somebody and say, here's what I need you to do. I need you to call every Thursday and say this, this, and this. I need you to call every Tuesday once you're under contract and say this, this, and this. On the consultation, I need you to say these things. I know that somebody brand new can walk in from the beginning to the end, and that customer would have probably a better experience than they would working with people who have been doing this 25, 30 years who struggle with steady communication. Right? And it's just that one piece alone. So it's about creating those processes that make it easier for us and easier for them. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to what the whole point of this is setting expectations. And it's the easiest thing not to do because it takes time and you never have to do it in the moment. You could always say, I'll do that later. But yet when you reach the moment where the chaos ensues because you didn't do it before, now it takes 5 times the time to try to fix it. And sometimes, unfortunately, you don't fix it and you can't fix it. And that makes it all worthwhile investing that time up front, making that leap from good to great by changing things and investing and setting expectations before you're in the fire. And that'll put you on that beeline, like I said, to be 10, 15 years ahead of where you would be if you just keep waiting until there's a big problem to learn a lesson to evolve your strategy. That's all I got for today.
Yeah, I think that's great. Thank you guys for sharing. Jane, Nazir, everyone, Francis, Pat, Kieran, everyone who really, gave some good feedback and shared some ahas. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next Monday.
Awesome job, everyone. Thank you.
Bye, guys.